Hey everyone, welcome to Cool Cast, where I interview very cool people doing very cool things. Today, I am super excited to have my friend Shira, Free Woman, with me to speak about her life and about some of the cool things that she's doing. She is someone I admire very much. She is a poet, she is a writer, she is an artist, she is a music maker, she's a rabbi, and she's also known as Sister Rainbow. So please join me in welcoming my dear friend, Shira. Hello. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Too.
Did I get all your titles? Is there anything else that you do?
I'm an activist.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a transformational activist.
yeah. Well, I noticed, I want to get to that in a minute, but well, actually, why don't we get to it right now? I was noticing your last email that says transformation station, love, peace, and justice, liberation, vibration. That's so Shira, guys. That is like so Shira. So much love and poetry. She lives a very colorful and very poetic life. And everything she does, she means. I think she really, really puts everything into what she does. Tell us about this revolution, or this transformation station.
Well, it started, I don't know, maybe about a year ago. OPME, who's my dear friend, and another friend, Hilda.
Could you speak up just a little bit,
Oh, sure.
and maybe get a little closer to your to your computer if you don't have a microphone, just so that yeah, great, thank you, Shira. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, OPME, who's a dear friend, suggested that we do a dinner and a kind of open mic at the Hara. That's the place that's across from the meeting where you and I used to go back before COVID. And so she cooked up a storm and we invited a whole bunch of people and we had like dinner. And then she read parts, she would start reading a story, and then people would come on and do everything from poetry to dance and music and storytelling and mime and so on. And it was like a really big smash hit. And so we did it again. And then, I did it again, like, I think it was like a month later. And then COVID hit. And I was staying with a dear friend. I was with a friend for 6 weeks, and that worked out really well. And I thought, why don't we do this? Why don't we take it to Zoom? So we took it to Zoom, and there were weeks where there were quite a few people, and there were weeks that were just, two or three.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had a very nice feel to it. All kinds of, again, mime, singing, dancing,
And
music.
so I noticed you're doing it again. You have another one coming up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Do you do it every Saturday?
it was kind of going along just about every Saturday, and it had been a little low on attendance. And OBME said, "Well, I'm going to come and I'm going to bring some people with me." And it just kind of like really started to gel, because when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 people, it becomes so much better. And I had written up stuff about it, but I didn't really have an intro to what it was. And then it occurred to me it could be Transformation Station.
I love that title.
Really love.
It's awesome.
And so I wrote it up last night, I think it was, and I asked OBME what she thought. She said it's great. She said don't add any more to it. I did put in theater and comedy because I wanted.
What do you mean? More is more.
I did put in, that I wanted people to understand that it could be any kind of art form. But what was really interesting was it was not simply people coming on and performing in various ways. People would talk about different things, like what are things you can do to build up your immune system in the face of COVID.
Oh, wow.
Chinese woman was talking about the significance of Chinese New Year and about Chinese culture. And we had 3 Black women who were all MDs at one point in their lives, and they were talking shop about what the challenges were like and what that was like. So it kind of has turned into a salon. Um, Although sometimes you might think of the salon as being for like the upper crust. This is for anybody and everybody. But you can just come and share what's on your heart and mind. And it's, if people want feedback on their writing or their stories, we'll give it. And if you don't, that's okay too. And it's just turned into something, really lovely, and it has all kinds of people. And it's a little different every week. Last week was Obiemi's birthday.
Oh yeah.
So the first hour and a half was her birthday party, and she hosted it, and I usually host it, and I don't know, it's just been really great. We have a lot of wonderful people that come, and
What if somebody wants to join, can anyone join?
anyone. It's just
So how would they get in touch with you, or how would they be able to join it?
Just give them my email address or phone number, and I'll send them a Zoom link. It's
Okay.
just
All right.
open, and it's
would you like to leave your email address right now, and not your phone number so much, but your email address, so that?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to give it to anybody. And
So what is it? I just mean we'll leave it right here. So what is it? Your email address?
It's Joy, Joy, Song, SONG, of love, LOVE, at AOL.com. Joy, Song of Love at AOL.com.
Joy, Song of Love at AOL.com.
Yeah,
and you can address that to Shira and just say that you'd like to be part of the transformation station.
It's open to all. Yes.
Open to all.
And children can come too. We'll
awesome.
modify it if necessary. Children are welcome. We've had some kids.
So I'm seeing, there's one on January 30th, February 6th, February 13th, February 20th.
A couple days, the 23rd.
And the 20, and yes, and this might not be out by the 23rd. So right. I'm just giving the updates for February.
It goes every Saturday.
Every Saturday then. Okay.
For so long, but there'll just be a new link at that point.
And it's at what time?
It's 4:00, and
PM Eastern Standard.
I encourage you to come on time, but you can come in at any point, and it goes usually till 4 till about 6 or 7, depending on
right.
flexible in terms.
Wonderful. That's so great. That's great that you're doing that, Shira. Well, I think that where I'd like to begin in interviewing you a little bit is just your history, because you've had a very unusual life.
Yes. I
know. Do you love hearing it that way?
Well, now I can see it that way.
You've had a very interesting life, unusual in many ways, very difficult. And, you are a survivor of many, many things. And, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but if you would just let us know a little bit about your early beginnings and how things were for you in the beginning.
Yeah, I was born in Lynn, Mass. And I grew up, the first year and a half of my life, I lived in Chelsea, which has always been an immigrant town. It's like a port city, and there's successive, different groups of immigrants came there at different points. And at one point, half the town was Jewish. And there were 18 synagogues in like 2.8 square miles, which is a lot. It was almost like a modern day shtetl, which is sort of an old Eastern European town, Jewish town transplanted to the New World. So I had a lot of old world flavor to it, like butcher shops, and so I spent the first year and a half of my life there. And my dad and my mom had a home in Marblehead, which is kind of a upper and middle class suburb. And I kind of grew up between those two worlds. Marblehead was very assimilated, with the exception of my father. There really were no Orthodox Jews there at all. And everybody was sort of trying to just fit in, I would say. And nobody was ever really mean, but you just sort of had a feeling they didn't quite like you. But it wasn't anything really over. People who weren't Jewish. But I myself, I always just felt like if you're nice to me, I'm happy to be your friend. That was always my, my thing. And Marblehead is very beautiful physically. It's there's you know, literally when you walk on the beach, there's rocks you can climb on, and it's just gorgeous. And if you keep walking, you'll come to another rock jutting out into the ocean. And the old part of the town is just really spectacular. I mean, there's a harbor, there's a lighthouse, there's a castle, but socially, not so much. It's not a terribly friendly kind of place. The golf course didn't let Jews in and stuff like that. It's not, the golf course actually was in the next town. So it's kind of tight, I would say, very tight socially. And I was thrilled when the hippies started to come in. I just like felt like they sprang up right out of the earth. So um,
What was it like
for
being Jewish in this town?
um, it was okay. I mean, we weren't really that. There's nothing really. My street was probably half Jewish. Most of the people on my street were Jewish, but they were not observant. And my father was. My mother, she died when I was 6. And
What does it mean? What does it mean? I want to get to your mom in a second, but what does it mean to be an observant Jew?
well, in other words, like he kept the Sabbath, so he wouldn't turn lights on, and the house was kosher, and you had 2 sets of dishes, and you kept all the holidays, and he would pray 3 times a day. That's that kind of
Two
thing.
sets of dishes, so kosher.
One was for like dairy and one was for meat. You used
Mhm.
separate sets of dishes and separate silverware and separate pots. And, it's a lot of, I think that you could kind of say there's a little bit of obsessive compulsive going on in there. All from you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. That's where it all came from. Somehow they ended up with 2 sets of dishes, and it's kind of funny. But anyway,
So you
so my mother was like not, I mean, she was Jewish.
you were an only child,
I was
yes?
an only child. My mother
Oh,
actually miscarried before I was born.
okay.
And she was really not into Judaism. She almost, I know she was Jewish because I know who her parents were, but she just didn't seem, she seemed like she came from something else. And I remember I found once, I wish I had not lost it. It looked like an Asiatic queen. And I just had a feeling that like she came from some goddess tradition. I mean, it's not like she ever talked to me about this, but that was just the feeling I had. She was very tall. She was my height. She
Uh-huh.
was very beautiful. She just had a dignity about her. And,
And
she was,
you said that you when you were 6, what
she
happened?
got breast cancer and she died when I was 6 years old. And the thing is that our house was just full of tension. You could feel it was almost like you were just like waiting for things to completely explode. It was just a feeling under the surface. My uncle lived with us on the other side of the house. His name was Sydney. He was just not well. He had psoriasis all over his body. He was just sickly. He may have had some kind of, maybe he had been in a mental hospital. I don't know. But he was a deeply troubled person and he did not get along with my mother and him were like fire and ice. They
That
just,
was that was your father's brother though,
my
right?
father's brother, right. And there was a lot of tension, like because Sydney required a lot of attention and my mother made him move to the other side of the house. And it was very tense. And my father was a stamp dealer. I was really into stamps. I was into tools. When I was little, I was really into blocks, and I would make replicas of the temple out of blocks. This is the
Wow.
thing. I wanted to be a carpenter when I was little.
Wow. Oh, actually, that was one of your questions at the end. I didn't know you wanted to be a carpenter. That's very interesting.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was totally into that. And I also like was into tools. I used to look at the Sears Roebuck catalog and all I wanted to do was look at the tools. I have almost zero interest in that now, but at the time I was just totally into tools and Legos and blocks. And
Did you like art like you do now? Were you artistic?
I liked color. I remember I had some colored blocks and I really liked them. There were a few times I didn't have, I just didn't do it very much. No, I remember a few times I went to the YWHA, which was like like a Jewish version of the Y, and there
Okay.
was an art class,
Uh-huh.
and I was into it, but it just wasn't very much a part of my early childhood. I
So
used
what tell us what happened when your
Well,
mom
what happened was
you
even
were
when
only
my
6,
mother,
that's not very old.
yeah, even when my mother was
Yeah.
alive, my father was abusing me, and it was a lot of crazy stuff. Like, there's just a lot of sexual abuse and kind of spiritual abuse that there was just something really crazy about the way he did religion. He wouldn't like go in a room to pray. I don't know if you've ever seen phylacteries. They're it looks like a little black box with a
Oh, yeah,
string
yeah,
around
okay.
the head. Yeah, it's called tefillin. And there was something when he prayed, it felt like religious warfare. That's just how it felt, honestly. I didn't have that feeling about it in general, but that was the feeling I had when he did it. And he would like take up all the space in the house, and it felt like something's really wrong. This doesn't feel good. This is not, there's nothing really godly about this. This is kind of like religious warfare. And I think it made my mother very, very angry. But she wasn't someone who was very outward in her anger.
Mhm.
I think she kind of took it inside of herself. And he smeared shit on me when I was little. There was sexual abuse going on, and my mother actually tried to leave him, and I know that because my cousin told me that she remembered it from the time, and her mother told her, come back to, you go home to your husband. When I had problems with my father, with your father, did I run home to my mother? Well, my grandmother couldn't go home to her mother. Her mother lived in Russia, and it was one of those things like you kind of left and you never went back there. So she did try to leave him, but it didn't work out.
Mm.
And it always felt like there was tension, and it felt like there was my mother versus my father, and then there was my mother versus Sydney, and then my father versus Sydney, and then I had aunts, Edna, Marion, and Mark, who all had the same mother and father. They had a different mother than my mother, but the same father, because when their mother died, Mr. Klavansky married my grandmother, and she had another daughter, Rose, from a previous marriage to a man named Arl, who was not related to me. And I know she loved him because of the way she talked about him. And her second husband, it just felt like it was, you were either going to get married or you're going to starve. So she got married, and it was just a lot of tension between the people in Lynn, Edna, Marin, and Mark, and between my father, and then there was tension between
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to move ahead because I want to move from
a
your
lot of
childhood
tension. Anyway,
to
and
what
then
happened.
my mother
What
died.
happened next? What happened next
Well,
then?
my mother got sick. I went to live with my aunts and uncle for the summer, and it was kind of bizarre because they kept talking about how happy the hospital is. And my mother's dying, and nobody is like in any way, shape, or form preparing me for this. I saw her one time. She came home, um, and then she was gone. And I can remember my uncle coming into the first grade and telling me, do you know what happens to people when they go to the hospital? And I said, no, I lied. And he said, well, sometimes they die. And I said, but she didn't. He said, she already has. And that was pretty much all. Nobody ever talked about her again. And one day I showed up when I was getting ready to leave school, and my father showed up. I was still living with my aunt and uncle. I was going to school in Marblehead, but my uncle would come and pick me up. And my father was there, and I said, oh, hi, Dad. And he said, well, aren't you coming with me? And I said, don't you want to come with me? I said, I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but no, I didn't want to go with him at all. And he said, you're coming home with me. And I said, well, I live at Edna and Marion Marks. oh no, you're coming home with me. And it was just like a total nightmare. I mean, it was sort of like everything that was under the surface just it exploded. And, he was just insane and with
So did
grief.
you become his surrogate
Yeah,
partner?
I mean, he had abused me before she died, but he just was like, "You're going to give me what she wouldn't," and he just raped me, hundreds of times, and every way that he could rape me, and made me dress like a hooker, and just made me do all kinds of stuff, and he strangled me. That was also really hard. He strangled me. Almost ritualistically, and there were about, I would say, maybe three times where um, I I think he was seriously thinking about killing me. The other times it was kind of like part of his, I don't know, just compulsive behavior or
He was
something.
really mentally ill, would you say?
Yeah, he was really messed up, and he would scream and yell, and he would break dishes, and he'd get very angry, and then he'd run out of the house, and just screaming and yelling a lot. And he would rant and rave about what had happened to Jews. And the things that he ranted and raved about were real, the Holocaust, but he'd be yelling at me. And it was like, don't you know they hate us? Don't you know they hate us? Meaning Christians, the pogroms, the Chaimelniki massacres, the pogroms, the blood libels, um, the Holocaust, the Dreyfus case. I knew all about these incidences of anti-Semitism throughout history, but he would scream it at me as if I was the perpetrator of these horrors. And I think I actually remember saying to him, "Daddy, I'm like 6 years old. Like, why are you, blaming all this stuff on me? Like, I'm just a little girl." And he also in the morning he would be listening to like Christian preachers who were very anti-Jewish, and it would be like, "See how they hate us." And it was just, most people like, listen to music, or you kind of get ready for your day, and I would just be like, "Oh, can't you put on that awful country music of yours?" I never really liked country music that much. Some of it is okay, but I didn't like it. But I thought I'd rather hear country music than people screaming and yelling and ranting and raving about, you know, whatever. And the odd thing was, like, I really didn't have any, very few bad personal experiences with non-Jews. They never really did anything to me. I could sense, you could feel it, that it was like they didn't quite know what to make of us, and they thought we were a little strange or a little odd or something. But nobody was calling me names. Nobody was beating me up. Nobody was, when I was in Chelsea, there was a girl who threw a penny at me, said a penny for the Jew, and called me a Jew bagel, which was very painful. But that was about it. I mean, everything else was secondhand through my father. Nobody was really attacking me for being Jewish. Like, the only people I was being attacked by were my father and my uncle. Mark was also, he was a tyrant. I mean, he had good, I want to say they both also had good qualities. My father loved to walk. He was really into nature. It could be fun to play 20 questions with him. He got me stamp albums. He would have made a really great weekend father with highly supervised visits, but he wasn't cut out for anything beyond that. And my uncle Mark also had a good side. He loved to draw. He loved horses. He got me a lot of nice books, like about the Eohippus and shells and How and Why Wonder books. That was really nice. Um, he got me a little Lionel. He would get me bikes and stuff like that. He was good in that way. He brought like a chrysolite rock from when he'd been in Greenland during the war. That stuff was cool. But he was a tyrant, and my aunts lived in terror of him. And I'm virtually positive that they tried to stop him, and he had them committed to a hospital and given electric shock.
Tried
And
to stop they tried to stop him
from abusing
from
me.
abusing you. Okay.
He was powerful, and he had a lot of money, and he was dangerous.
Mm.
And I am virtually certain that he was gay. I mean, I just looked at a picture of him with a friend that I knew, and this guy just looks so gay, and it's clear that he was in love with my uncle. And I think that, he was a big guy. He was, my father was skinny. He was sort of, the stereotypical like alpha kind of guy. And I think that it wasn't acceptable. And
Within your community, it wouldn't have been considered.
it wasn't acceptable. And so he couldn't cope with it, and so, but he would yell, and he was very dominant, and he
I
would.
want to I want to move ahead a little bit here too.
Sure, sure,
So
sure, yeah,
so let's move into beyond. So we know a little bit about your childhood, that
yeah,
you didn't have the easiest start. That
yeah,
uh,
right,
so so part of your story, I know, has to do with your father uh, finally passed away. You became kind of a ward of the state, or
yeah,
I'm not even sure exactly how.
I really
Uh, and,
did.
and and you went on some meds, and tell us a little bit about
Sure. I mean, I
that
would
part of
say
your life.
in a nutshell, like I was
Yeah,
very destructive from a very young age. I was suicidal at the age of
yeah.
8 and engaged in
And understandably, my goodness, right?
behavior. And I developed an eating disorder probably starting around 9, and it really blossomed around 14. And I had some other, compulsive, addictive patterns around money and, sexuality and so on. And then, so I got through high school, and I think the things that really got me through, I loved nature. I loved reading. I was really smart. I was really, when I learned about the civil rights movement, I like it. I loved it. I had a teacher, Jim Chatham, and he always spoke up for Black people and women and everybody. And, he really introduced me to that. And I learned about the Vietnam War and what a mess that was. And I love the hippies. They were very respectful to me. Dirty on the outside and clean on the inside was how they felt to me. And so I kind of, I gravitated away from orthodoxy, became a feminist when I was like 14. I started going to the Havrat Shalom community I still belong to, where they do Jewish observance, but they include women, and they're accepting of gay people, and they're
And
welcoming to.
that's where you're a rabbi right now too, right?
Right. Well, I'm not the rabbi. I'm just
What a rabbi.
my own. Yeah. I mean, there's no rabbi there per se. We lead the services collectively at the
Oh,
Havra.
all right.
But it's welcoming to people of other religions. It's just it's a lovely place. I started going there when I was like 17, and so I could hold the Torahs, and it was very exciting to me and
That's
everything. And
cool.
and then I went to Israel, and that was, it was nice to be in a country that was where I wasn't a minority, and that was good. And I learned about what was going on with Palestinians and protested and studied there. And I came out as a lesbian there, and then I, came back.
How long did you went to school there?
I went to like a yeshiva, which is like religious studies, and
Okay.
usually they're not co-ed, but this one, even though it was semi-orthodox, was co-ed. So I went there for a year. My father found out that I was gay. He was trying to change me, and I knew I had to get out of the country. So I left, and I came back, and I went to college. I went to NYU for a year and a half. Then I went out to Oberlin,
What did you study?
creative writing.
Mhm. So at that time, you were interested in writing then?
I was interested. Yeah, I'd been a writer since I was like 14.
Mhm.
And then I went to Oberlin, and one of the highlights was we put together this feminist Haggadah, this Passover story from, sort of Jewish women's perspective, and we had a big Seder for 60 people, and it was pretty great.
Ah, that's
And
cool.
that was pretty great. And then I came back to Boston, and I met a whole bunch of people that were in peer support groups
Mhm.
for alcohol and drugs. And I remember asking, "What do you think about? Do you think it would help me with food?" Because that was the most obvious thing. And she said, "Well, it helped me stop using drugs, so I think it would help you with food." And my therapist encouraged me. And I had this therapist from when I was 17, and even when I went away, when I would come home, I would leave and I would come home, and she would be my therapist. And so she encouraged me to go to OA. I got, oh, well, I'm trying not to make that public, but anyway. Okay. She encouraged me to go to this peer support group. It helped me, although it was it was very controlling. I heard like 20 people say when I was sick I was a lesbian. And what I say is I was a lot sicker then than I am now. I was a lesbian then. I'm still a lesbian, you know. So anyway, it was kind of, you know, there was a tremendous level of control in some of those early meetings that was kind of scary. And I finally couldn't take it anymore. So I left and I went to a different community. But I got, you know, that was a big deal that I stopped binging. Huge. It was like a huge breakthrough for me. However, um, I was in other similar types of support groups, and suddenly everybody was starting to use antidepressants. And it was like hula hoops, only much more dangerous than hula hoops. And I remember in that particular program, when that program started, it was so strong. We had a lot of newcomers coming in, we had a lot of old timers, and it was just a really great program. And the program started to go down, like people weren't sober, and there was a lot of, it just became very ingrown. And I think that coincided with when people were more and more
Or
people were
started to get on meds.
using
Yeah.
the drugs. Anyway, I remember asking my therapist, Midge, I said, you know, what do you think of the antidepressants? And I trusted her, and she was like, oh, I'm not afraid of them. Oh, you know, there'll be a floor beneath you, you know, when you take them.
Tell me first, were you depressed at the time?
Yeah, I was. I had suffered from depression from, you know,
Yeah.
the time I was a kid. I was also very anxious as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I had trouble sleeping and I had racing thoughts. And so she made it sound like it was going to be nirvana. And I remember going to the psychopharmacologist she referred me to. This woman was so nervous. I mean, it was like palpable. It'd be like going to a fitness trainer who was like weighed 400 pounds or something.
Mhm.
You know, it just felt like, why is she so nervous? And we were trying different drugs. And I remember I felt good for about 2 weeks, and then I felt no different. And I really wanted to please Midge. I really wanted to please her. And I don't know what would have happened if I'd said, nope, I'm not doing this. I didn't want to do the drugs. My heart and my gut told me this is a bad idea. But I did it. And after 2 weeks, I didn't have the wherewithal to say, I don't see any difference, so I'm going to stop. And that was 19, like late 89, then then I like about a year later, I started binging again. I lost my sobriety in another program. And I was in relapse until about 94. I went into treatment for my eating disorder. And I remember when I was in there, the psychiatrist said, it was a good hospital in many ways. I mean, they had great arts program, they had great psychodrama. It was a good program. However, he said, I want to put you on another antidepressant. And I was like, why? I'm not depressed. I'm already on one. Why do I need a second when I'm not depressed? And I didn't have the wherewithal. I think he was doing it to justify, it was a long hospitalization. And I think he did it to justify the hospitalization. And I didn't have the wherewithal. And so now I'm on two drugs. You know, I think it was I don't remember. It may have been trazodone and Paxil, I think, or something like that. And that was 94. And I stayed abstinent for maybe another 16 months. And when I came back from there, I went into, I think I went to McLean, a program at McLean, in a women's outpatient program. And I had also been to, in 1990, I'd been to Elizabeth Stonehouse, which was a really great program, which was run mostly by women who had been battered or who were recovering alcoholics or drug addicts. And those programs are usually much better. I mean, this program was okay, but we were just doing therapy from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. And I just don't really feel like it did much for me at all, really. The other program was much more helpful to me.
What was the difference between the two of them?
Well, I think the difference was that Elizabeth Stonehouse was very practical. It was, you know, it was geared toward daily life. I would say it was a little more working class, maybe in orientation. And it wasn't like we were talking about our feelings all day long. You know, we were talking about, okay, did we, you know, how are things going in the house? And are we, you know, how are we getting along with each other and what issues are coming up? It was just much more practical and oriented toward life.
Mhm.
And I found it, I loved living in Elizabeth Stonehouse because it was all kinds of women. There were a lot of Black women, Latino women, and it was challenging at times, but I don't know, it was enriching to meet people of different backgrounds. And I just didn't want to keep hearing like more about trauma and talking about it from morning until night. I just don't feel like it did much for me. The art was good. Some of the people were very nice, but it just felt like, why are we spending
Do
all
you
day
feel like
long
it was like spinning a lot? Like just like constantly spinning?
spinning? We're just talking about
Mm,
trauma from morning until night. And a lot of those day programs that I was in, I think that the companies really like, you know, they'll call it a feminist program and they give you drugs, or they'll call it a gay program and they'll give you drugs, and they'll call it a Black program and they'll give you drugs. I think they really took over those movements and co-opted them and used them to,
or
you know,
like a pharmaceutical,
pharmaceuticals and
yeah.
yeah, and I don't
How
think.
many years, in all? Because now you're off the drugs right now.
Right. So I
Yeah,
was on those drugs. I went on in, let's see, 89, and I was on them for 27 and a half years.
it's a
I was
long
on those
time.
drugs, a long time. And then, so 90, after 94, in 97, I had a breakdown. I couldn't sleep for like 2 weeks. And I just, you know, flipped out and ended up going to the hospital. And then I think I just did some crazy things, and then they put me on an antipsychotic, Trilofan, and then 6 months later I was in the hospital again. That was in 97, and then 99 I had a suicide attempt. I swallowed a whole bunch of pills, and then and then there were more hospitalizations. There was just a time where, you know, when I was home, I was terrified that I would hurt myself or, you know, or just do something crazy. So every time I felt unsafe, I would run to the hospital. And I was in the hospital, I was afraid of the drugs and I was afraid of ECT. And I just was really a nightmare existence. But I did learn how to meditate. I had a sponsor who taught me how to meditate, and that was life saving because I finally found, and this just kept going on for years until in 2000, I flipped out and I tried to kill myself and I smashed up my place and I jumped onto the third rail and can't explain why I didn't die because it was live. And I lost my apartment after that, and you know it was just complete craziness. And I knew that I wasn't right, and it was a time when I really should have gone to the hospital. I told my therapist I would go to the hospital, and I didn't. And I had to. I think they wanted me to leave the program. I was going to go into another program that I didn't like, and I didn't have the wherewithal to say I'm not ready for this, and I don't like this program, and I'm not going to go. It doesn't feel like it's a good program for me.
Well, do you feel like with all the drugs that you were taking, that was really hard to be clear, even know what you wanted or what you
Well,
needed?
the truth was, when that particular thing happened, I had stopped abruptly taking the
Okay.
pills, just abruptly, in a very crazy way.
So you're
Just
kind of detoxing.
so I just stopped, and I
Yeah.
was on like 4 or 5 drugs at that point. You know, they had me
You
on.
cold you were cold turkey.
Yeah, and it wasn't. There was no thought process. It was just craziness,
Uh-huh.
you know. And I was on like trazodone, Effexor, gabapentin, which is actually like an anti-seizure and pain medication, but they use it for moods. And I was on Ativan and Risperdal. I mean, I was on 5 drugs, and I just stopped, or 4 or 5 at the time. And that was really, I think the withdrawal may have put me over the top. And I was just, you know,
Yeah.
I was really crazy. And then I was in the hospital for a long time, and I ended up in a 1 month rest home, and then I ended up in another rest home for like 2 years. It was a nightmare place. It really was horrible. I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to, I'm trying to remember, then I ended up going to this thing, Zuzu's. It was supposed to be an alternative. mental, health thing that really didn't work out. And I, did some stuff that wasn't good at that place. And then I had to leave. And then I moved to Somerville. And then I got my apartment in Brookline.
Mhm.
And the one thing that happened was I could not talk. I was whispering for like 2 years. I had laryngitis, and I went to a speech pathologist, extremely nice man, and he's like, I don't know why you can't talk. There's nothing wrong with your voice box. And the doctor at the day programs, I said, and I just had this like, like intuition, could it be the drugs? And he said, oh, it could be Risperdal. It might be causing the muscles in your throat to constrict. And so it took me like a year. I was frightened to come off of them because of what had happened, but I went anyway. And but I asked my doctor at the time. I said, I want to come off of this drug. I can't talk. I said, it's crippling me. And I knew enough not to go on another drug because I thought, I'll take another drug and it'll affect my eyesight or my hearing or God knows what. And he said to me, that's not crippled. Crippled would be if you couldn't go to the bathroom. And I said, that is totally unacceptable to me. I'm leaving and I'm getting another doctor. I just walked out. I just had a moment of, I didn't argue with him. I just said, that's totally unacceptable. I went to the social worker and I said, this is what he said to me. Please get me another doctor. And the guy I got was sort of, typical older, somewhat patronizing Jewish man. I will always be grateful to him, Dr. Shaw. He did an exam and he was willing to take me off the drug.
How long did it take you to get off all of them?
Well, all of them, it took another 13 and a half years. That one, several months, and immediately my voice came back. And it wasn't only my physical voice, I couldn't articulate. I'd just be hanging there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said to him, can I come off the other drugs? He says, as long as you, do it slowly and safely.
So you said 13 years it took you to get
13 and a half years. Now, I was not, it wasn't a conscious, that's how long. I wasn't like, okay, now I'm coming off the drugs. I'm sure it wouldn't have taken me 13 and a half years. But the whole process from when I started coming off the Risperdal, actually, they took me off Ativan because I was going into a program where they didn't allow you to be on a benzo. So they took me off Ativan in the hospital, and my foot would, was just, my foot was just going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down.
So what has been the difference for you now on the drugs and off the drugs? And how long have you been off everything?
I've been off of everything for 3 years, 7 months, and about 7.5 months at this
So
point.
so what do people tell you about how you've changed since you've been off them?
People have said I'm calmer. I'm more. I think I'm a little more I come across more organized, even more internally organized. And oddly, when I was on them, like I would cry and cry and cry and cry. I'd be walking down the street and I was hysterical with crying. And I don't think it's wrong to cry, but I just feel that it really affected my emotions in a certain way and I often had the feeling that it was holding my anger down somehow. But when you push something down, it's like a spring.
Right.
That can just be really dangerous. And I just want to say the things that helped me get off them was, well, the fact that I couldn't talk, and I love to talk, as you know. And my friend, I'll just call him A, he said, he saw me at the hospital after the suicide attempt. He just looked at me and he said, Shifra, I experience you as a drug addict. And I was like, oh, I know he's not insulting me because he was a drug addict. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head.
Mm.
And I remember one other thing I can't remember if I was home or in the hospital, but I was looking, I was, at that time, I was just doing crazy things. I was into all this pornography. It was really not good. And I could feel my mother, like, who died a long time ago. And she came to me and she was screaming. And my mother was not a screamer. And she was like, if you think this is going to come out okay, you are wrong. You are on all these drugs. She said, I couldn't care less if you're gay. I don't care about these stupid things that some people care about, whether you marry a Jew or a non-Jew. I don't care about those things, but there are things that are just not okay to do and are ways that are not okay to be. And you are destroying yourself with these drugs, and it is not okay. And don't tell yourself everything is going to be okay if you keep doing what you're doing, because you will destroy yourself. And she was screaming, and I was like, okay. I remember it. It shook me. And then I don't know exactly how the process was. Once I came off the Risperdal, then I came off of Effexor and then gabapentin, which was hard because it was powdered. And then the last one was trazodone. And I remember I made amends to that friend A. I had done something monumentally stupid that had been very hurtful to him. And he said, I forgive you. You're my friend. You're my comrade. But I'm afraid of your active addiction to psychotropes. And I thought, the way to complete this amends is to get off the last drug. Mm-hmm. And I had aimed for January of 2017. That's what I aimed for. And I was still on 50 milligrams. I didn't take it that night. And I thought, do I go from 50 to 0? And I thought, no, don't do that. That's too steep a jump. You do not want to end up in the hospital again, back on more drugs. Even if you have to take longer, that's okay. Just do it the right way. And I had a friend, Nancy Lodi, a brain integrationist. She muscle tested and figured it out that my birthday would be my first day off the drugs. And she said, go down from 50 to 25. And then I went down from 25 to 12 and a half. And then I went down to 6.25. And to go from 6.25 on a drug that people typically take 100 to 200 milligrams of was not scary. And so the first night I couldn't sleep. Maybe I slept a half an hour. The second night I slept for 2 hours. The third night, maybe 3 or 4. And, by the end of the week, my sleep was the same as it had always been. And that was it. And I kept them. I had some more left, and I didn't feel like throwing them out. I wasn't planning to take them, but I just let myself keep them there. And then after a month or two, I said, no, we're just going to flush these down the toilet. And then I canceled the prescription. And I don't know, it was so frustrating because when I was on them, I couldn't learn. And I'm really smart and I couldn't
You
learn.
are. That's one of the things I really noticed about you when you came off them, how your brilliance came out, and your memory, and your ability to speak and write. And I want to talk a little bit about, we just have a few minutes left, and I want to talk about some of the things that you're doing, some of the initiatives that you're doing, because you have worked with people who are trying to get off meds. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Some of the initiatives, I found that I would tell people that I had come off the drugs, and many people would say, oh, can you tell me about that? And many of them said, would you know a doctor who could help me? And it turns out that I do work with a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. He doesn't function as people's doctor, but as a consultant. And so we've had groups with people who want to come off them, and he can give them medical advice, which I can't because I'm not a medical person. And so we've had both families of people who have mental health issues and people who want to, who are on the drugs themselves. And it's been really great to have him on. The first one we did with OPME and him, and then she said, well, I'll come on here and there. But
she's a doctor, right?
She's a retired medical doctor. Yeah, but he's a psychiatrist. Uh-huh. And so, we did one just for one person, and we also have done, group ones where people who talked about it. And I put together a packet, mm-hmm. an online packet of things you can do other than taking drugs, everything from different organizations that help people to eating certain ways, to meditating, to...
So if somebody wanted that packet, or if they wanted to
I'm happy to give it to anybody. Yeah.
Would they email you again?
Just email me. Yeah.
Do you want to give that email one more time?
Joy, Joy, song of love at AOL.com. Joy, song of love at AOL.com. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just some information about groups and things you can do, some of which I'm really familiar with and some not so much. So you really have to do your own research about some of it.
It's really important for people to see that you can get to the other side because it's a really tough journey, isn't it?
It is definitely a tough journey. I mean, I was so negative. I mean, as you know, because you mentioned me, I
I do know, but I also saw who you were.
right,
And I
right. I was under a pall of negativity, and I just had this feeling that I was such a bad, evil person.
yeah,
And I don't know, like I'm a really nice person. Like I have my stuff. I can, I can be not nice. But generally speaking, I want to talk to everybody along the way. I talk to the homeless people. I really just want to be of service and I love
there is no one
everybody.
kinder, I think, and more loving and caring than you are, Shira, in
I'm
terms of
sorry.
there's no one more loving and caring about people than you
Yeah,
are.
and
I've seen
and
you,
it's so
yeah,
tragic that somebody like me runs around, for 55 years thinking I'm so terrible, and it was just a pall of, I don't know how to describe it. I think there was spiritual abuse, ritual abuse in there, and
maybe.
and I was able to forgive. That was a huge thing. That Byron Katie workshop made a big difference. And I
Yeah.
remember I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was thinking, I can't do this. I don't know how to forgive. I can't do it. I was in physical pain. Somebody was massaging my neck. It wasn't working. And I was just like, what do I do? And what I decided to do was I said, look, you're in pain. Why don't you take a Tylenol? It was like, don't be a martyr. Don't act like this is not Oxycontin. Take a Tylenol. Maybe you'll be in a little less pain. So I took a Tylenol. Nothing. Okay. Then I thought, you paid $900. Why don't you do a worksheet? I did 2 worksheets. It did nothing. And then I see this statue of Radha. I had no idea who Radha was. I never heard of it. I didn't know if it was male or female. And I was like, Radha, you got to help me out. I'm like at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. And I just wrote a little prayer. And then this poem came to me that I read to you, at that time. And it was like there was a breakthrough. And I did many more rituals where, yeah, I remember one time I came home from a friend's house and something told me, I was like, I could feel something. And I was like, what is it? What is it? And I could feel like it's my father. And I was like, what do you want, you motherfucker? I mean, that was how spiritual I was. And he said, I want you to forgive me. And I was like, I don't want to forgive you, you bastard. And he said, you must. And I was like, oh, okay. Not for my sake, but for yours. And I was like, okay, what do I do? I couldn't find my cell phone. I normally would have called 20 people. And so he just said, packed up some stuff. He said, don't talk to anybody on the way. Just if anybody comes by and says something. And I just went and I laid all this stuff down. And a couple came by and I did speak to them, and a young man who had gotten lost in the woods. It was interesting, but I don't know. I did something and it kind of just, I don't know. I somehow was able to do it. And then there was another time and I thought, well, if I just go and I do model mugging, then maybe I'll be able to forgive. And I was texting you and you said, I hope you're able to forgive your father while you're still alive. And I thought, it might be a really good thing for me to do model mugging. But if I make the forgiveness dependent on model mugging, what if I don't like model mugging? What if they don't have a class? What's going to happen then? So I just sort of went and I did that. I just did that. I did that work, and then I don't know. I'm just not so angry. I still have anger, but it's not. It's just not like it. It's not like it used to be. The anger is
No,
just.
it's really not. You have come such a long way. The last thing I want to ask you about, we have just like a few minutes left here, but something really wonderful has happened for you this year in terms of
Oh,
where you where you were a few months ago and where you are now. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I moved. I had pretty much wanted to move from the time I moved into my little place, and which actually was a sweet little place. And I think I didn't appreciate it enough. But when they had a Section 8, when they offered a Section 8 because they're renovating and they needed empty apartments, I said, you have to take this. Even if you're scared, you've got to take this because you keep saying you want to move. Now's your opportunity. You better do it. So I did. And that summer, I was so angry one day. I slammed my toe down and I I broke my toe because I slammed it down so badly, like 5 or 6 times. I broke a toe. Anyway, but I looked at a place in Arlington, um, and there was a guy who helped you, and I saw the place in Arlington, and I liked it. I wasn't any. I liked the place, and it looked like when it looked like I was going to get it, and I didn't have the money for it. I remember actually talking to you, and you were saying, "Well, work, do anything you need to do, ask for money." And so I just asked everybody for money, and I got like $4,300 in like 3 days. My friend I was staying with, I didn't ask her for money. She gave me 500. She called another friend who gave me 1,000, just like that. And another person gave me $1,000, and the church really like jumped in to help me. Anyway, so they gave me all this. The money came through, and then the apartment, fell through because it didn't include utilities. It would have cost me another $300. And I also realized they were looking for someone who was not me. They were very worried about me. They wanted someone super quiet and super clean. Like, it's not going to happen. So I remember feeling like I was so upset, and I was like, I'm never going to try for anything I want again because I can't have anything. And I remember saying, honey, I know you feel really upset, but that's not a winning attitude, and you won't really get anything in life if you never go for anything. And something told me, go on Craigslist. I went on, I called up. It was the high end, the limit of what Section 8 would pay. And something said, check it out. And when I went and saw this place, I was like, oh my God. And the tenant was the nicest man. Oh, can I leave you all my furniture? I was like, yeah, you can leave me all your furniture. That will be just fine. And it was tricky because he had to move. He had to move out before they did the inspection. You can't be living here. So he had to be willing to move, and he was willing. And it got very delayed, and the inspection got delayed by 10 days, which had nothing to do with me. And I made sure I had a backup plan, which was to stay with my friend Tamara. And if I had to go to the Chavra a couple nights a week, I would have. So I knew I wasn't going to be on the street. And you know, I got it. And I remember, no, I'm holding on for this. I thought I could have gone and had the guy find me something. I could have gone to the government kind of things that people encourage you to go to. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to live in the same place like I lived in before. And so it was a big risk, but I took it, and I moved. Yeah. And I love it.
And now she just showed it to me. It looks fabulous.
It's a beautiful place.
And what a difference a year has made. Well, 3 years actually.
Yeah.
4 years, and in
yeah. And the other thing was that I remember one day, about 4 or 5 days before I knew if I was going to get it, I was walking by this bush, and I pray under all the trees. I swear, they know me. The trees in Brookline, they all know me. And this bush said, "Oh, you're gonna get that apartment. We got that for you. You're gonna get that apartment." And the guy who lived here before called it the tree house. And sure enough, a few days later, I found out that I had gotten the apartment.
And you're also advocating for other people now, right?
My friend, we'll just call him he fell, and he can't go back to his apartment. And so I've been on the phone advocating, and there's somebody, he's not there now, but there was somebody sleeping just outside of behind my building. So I was giving him food, and a friend and I went out on the day before Martin Luther King Day, and we were handing out sandwiches to people. So yeah, I've kind of learned how to, advocate for people. And my friend even paid, she paid me. I didn't ask her to pay me, but she paid me. And this other person who I was helping with emotional stuff, she said, "Oh, can I send you some money?" I was like, "Okay." So that, the money has been better. And my mentors, I guess, Brother Blue was really, the Sister Rainbow thing was kind of for my association with him. He would say, "You've got to tell the religions have failed us, the politics have failed us. We have to tell the inclusive story to stop people from killing each other." And he was just this astonishing person who wore butterflies and went everywhere. And you would think he was a street guy, and he went to Harvard and Yale, and he had all kinds of degrees, and then he took it back. He would do everything from royalty to jails and the streets. You'd see him in the street with his wife Ruth, was his manager, and I was just so affected by him. And you really just the 3 4 years that you sponsored me was pretty extraordinary. And my friend, many people, but my friend Opiemi, you know, um, she took me to all these different interfaith places. Like suddenly I'm with the, you know, the Northern European pagans and Goddess Mountain, another, you know, sort of feminist pagan place, and Congregationalist church making untraditional Easter bonnets and doing kirtan, you know, the Hindu singing. And now I'm in 4 spiritual communities now. Unity in the City, which taught me I was responsible for myself. I did not want to be responsible for myself. I really did not. They taught me that. They were progressive, but they said, you create your own life. And then I went back to Havrat Shalom. No, then I was in a Buddhist group, SGI, and it's sort of the chanting gave me the power to do things I couldn't do before. There were all these things that I wanted to do. I wanted to move, I couldn't. I wanted to get off the drugs, I couldn't. I wanted to work, and I couldn't. It was so frustrating. And it just sort of gave me the power to achieve things for myself and also for the world. There's a sense of you take care of yourself, but you also are there for others. And then I went back to Havrat Shalom, which had been my community when I was a kid. When one of the members, who was very special, died, I thought, I got to go back. And it's nice to sleep there, because I remember, I was here when I was 17. I used to sleep in this, you know, in this same building. People were always kind to me. And now I'm back, you know, so many years later. And then I just recently, I made a friend in the neighborhood. I just said hello to this woman. And she said, you're the first person who said hello to me in a year and a half. So I became friends with her and her beautiful little daughter. And she says, oh, I go to this Baha'i community. So now I go and I you know, so I'm like,
Right.
I
Well,
love.
Katrina, I hate to interrupt, but we're out of time now. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to hear about your life. And I'll
Okay.
just reiterate, if anybody is interested in Transformation Station, Love, Peace, and
Yes.
Justice and Liberation, or a liberation vibration.
Right.
It's on Saturdays at 4 p.m. every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And you can get in touch with Shifra by emailing her at joysongoflove@aol.com.
Yeah, and if you're interested, if you want help with mental health alternatives or coming off of psych meds with help from a psychiatrist, we are available to
Thank you.
help you. And I also, the other thing I do is, if you need poems, like for any occasion, you know, like if it's a bar mitzvah, a wedding, a
Poems,
funeral,
yes.
poems for any.
Yeah, that's we should mention that Shira can whip up a poem in 2 seconds. Know you for 1 second and have a whole poem for you.
Form it or just write it for you and illustrate
Yeah,
it for
yeah,
you.
excellent, beautiful, beautiful poems. Well,
All right.
bless you, my dear. It's great to see you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for being on Cool Cast.
Thank you. Cool.
Thank
Cat.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.